Last week I started the series on heaven and I opened it up with a story that I told you about from second grade. And I had to write about something that excited me and something I was very interested in. And because I was going to church as a young boy, I heard the stories a lot. I heard about heaven and I wanted to know what it was like. So since then, since I've been about 4, 5, 6 years old, I have been interested in heaven. I want to know what it's like, and I really looking forward to getting there. So what I'm going to do over the next few weeks is I'm going to read some passages from the Bible to give you a better description of what heaven is like, and hopefully, when you hear these and you read them on your own, you will become excited like me and interested into what heaven is like. In the New Testament, Paul, he wrote most of the New Testament. We've talked about him before. He wrote a couple letters to the church of Corinth. It's called First and Second Corinthians, and he writes a couple things just to get us started here. The first thing he writes is, "What no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love Him." Paul's telling us right here that there are things that God's prepared for us in heaven that we just can't imagine. And that's how wonderful they are. They're just so beautiful that we have no idea what it's like. But thankfully, the Bible gives us some passages that gives us a little bit of an idea. He also goes on to write, "For we know that if the tent that is our earthly home is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens." What Paul is telling us right there is that we are going to die. And eventually, this body that you're in now is not going to be needed in heaven. God's going to give us a new body. He's going to give us something that will last for eternity. We have no idea what it is. We couldn't even begin to think. But there's something special coming when we get there. Remember, Jesus said, in my father's house there are many mansions, many places for you to dwell, and that I'm going to build them for you, and when I come back to get you, I will bring you to them. And we don't know what it's like, but Jesus tells us that there is something there, something wonderful and marvelous for us, and that he is going to come at a time when it's time for these bodies to give up, and that's the end. No matter how it happens, he's coming back to get you. If you've put your trust and your faith in him, that he is who he says he is. Now, we're going to jump back into the Old Testament. I'm going to read to you different visions of heaven from some of the prophets. Now, prophets in the Old Testament, and there are still prophets today, but a prophet is basically a person who has God's message and delivers it. But in the Old Testament, before Jesus came, God used these different men and women to teach his word to his people. And these men and women, the prophets, were so in tune with God. They were so every day talking to him. God was talking back to them. God gave them the privilege sometimes of either taking them to heaven to show them what heaven was like, or giving it to them in a vision or a dream or something. But somehow, some way, God showed them what heaven was like. And they all seem to have a running theme here. So let me just read a few of them for you. There was one prophet, his name was Micaiah. He says, "Therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by, on his right hand and on his left." Then another prophet, Ezekiel, says, "And above the firmament over the heads was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like a sapphire stone, like the likeness of the throne." All right, on the likeness of the throne was the likeness with the appearance of a man high above it. Then Daniel, another prophet, says, "I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him, and 1,000 thousands ministered to him, 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were open." Now, see, in Daniel, what he's telling us is that God gave him a vision of heaven and said, "Listen, I saw heaven, and in heaven was something that looked like a throne. And on that throne was something that looked like a man. And there was just thousands and 10,000s and millions and just an uncountable number of beings that were around him. Whether these were angels, these were people who had already died, these were redeemed people from the future, whatever it is, there was so many people around him. And then he says the court was seated and the books were opened. And that's a picture of how we are going to stand before God. And when we stand before God, when we die, he's going to look at one thing. Did you accept his offer of salvation? Did you say, yes, God, I believe that you raised Jesus from the dead and that Jesus is Lord? If you say that with your mouth and believe it in your heart, you will be saved. And he's going to answer. That's what it is. The court was seated and the books were open, and he's going to look and he's going to see whether your name is there or not. And that's what I want you to get to. I want you to get to that point where you know that your name is written in his book. Now, somewhere down the line, I don't know when, I don't know how, but we're going to talk about that in specifically. That's going to come. But for now, I just want you to see what's going on in heaven. Then there was another prophet. His name was Isaiah. He's one of my favorites, and it's a book we're studying in Sunday school right now. And Isaiah had a vision of heaven. Isaiah is one of the most popular prophets. As a matter of fact, Jesus quotes Isaiah a lot. I forget what the number is, but it's an awful lot. And Isaiah is the most quoted prophet most quoted in the New Testament, a prophet from the Old Testament, if you understand it. But anyway, so what Isaiah was giving a message out to God's people at the time, and he says here, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, and with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were all calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. At the sound of their voices, the doorposts and the thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Woe to me, I cried, I am ruined, for I am a God of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. And my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Isaiah was brought to heaven, and he was shown heaven, and he saw God's throne, and he saw how large heaven was. He saw how massive and how prominent God's throne was. And he saw the angels and the seraphim are kind of angels, flying around heaven, and all these guys were doing was yelling back and forth to each other, God is holy, holy is God, holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. That's all they kept doing, back and forth to each other, back and forth to each other. That's all Isaiah saw. And their voices were so loud and so strong that it made heaven shake. And Isaiah looked at this, what was going on around him, and he realized as a human being, he was ruined. There was nothing he could do up there. He was absolutely devastated. That's how powerful heaven is. And for us as humans, we don't know that. I guess the closest thing we could come to is imagine if you're standing next to a freight train that goes by you at 400 miles an hour, or standing next to an airplane that's landing overhead. Those powerful things. That's probably not even close to what heaven is like. But the point is that heaven is so majestic, so glorious, so beautiful, filled with so much wonder that we need to be cleaned to get there. And Isaiah realized that he did not have what it took to get to heaven. I could read something else into Isaiah, maybe I will next week, but to show you how Isaiah would be cleansed. And it's basically through fire. But I don't want to get off into that tangent. The point is I want you to see heaven. I want you to get an understanding of what there's there. There's a throne there. God occupies the throne. And when we get there, we're going to see this throne. We're going to see the brilliant colors. We're going to see all the activity that goes around it. Next week, I'm going to bring you to the book of Revelation. Book of Revelation is about the end times. It's my favorite book of the Bible. I've studied it a lot. And there are certain chapters in the book of Revelation that talk exactly what heaven looks like and what we can expect. So anyway, have a great week.